It looks like we're on YouTube, Allison. Is that correct? You're okay.
All right.
All right.
Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the rescheduled special board of directors meeting for Midco Salt and Waste Corporation for January 14th, 2021. In accordance with our start our agenda as previously published. Our first item on our agenda is if we have any public or director's comments. Does anybody, I know we have no public at the moment. Does any director have any comment they want to make before we proceed into the rest of the agenda? Not seeing any hands, I will proceed to, we have reviewed approval of the October 29, 2020 meeting minutes. Any comments on those meeting minutes by anybody, any director? Not seeing any. Do I have a motion, please?
I would move those minutes.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Kern?
Yes.
Denise?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Wendy? You're muted, Wendy, but I saw you say yes. Brian?
I'm a yes, but Josh probably should abstain since he wasn't at that meeting.
Yeah, excellent point. That's excellent point. Allison?
Same abstention for me.
Okay, and Bob, yes. So the meeting minutes are approved. Then secondly, we have a very brief board of a review of the minutes from the meeting that didn't occur on December 16th, which is what the meeting minutes say. So I have a motion to accept those minutes.
One little thing
Go
that
ahead.
it says the meeting and attendant agenda was to be rescheduled to a date uncertain. I don't know if that's a term, attendant agenda. I don't think, it seems like it must be a typo unless it's some sort of legal term that I'm not aware of, but.
I thought it was a term too.
Accompanying agenda.
Accompanying agenda is what it should say. The accompanying agenda is moved to a date date uncertain.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't
With
think
that,
attendance wrong.
with that modification, Denise, go ahead.
I don't think attendance wrong. I mean,
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I don't
you're like
either.
an attendant at a wedding. You're standing next, you're supporting
Yeah,
somebody.
I agree.
Company.
Okay, that's fine.
Motion,
New word for me.
It's weird.
motion.
I move we approve the minutes of December 16th.
Okay.
Second.
Second, motion made and seconded. Discussion, not seeing any. Roll call vote. Brian?
I'm good, yes.
Josh?
Dane?
That was your first meeting that you got to attend and it didn't happen.
Oh, that one. Well, then, yes.
Bob, I think you're saying the 16th, but those are the meetings at the 30th.
Yeah, but Josh wasn't there for that one. That turned
Right.
into a workshop.
That was
Right.
the workshop one. That's right.
Then I go back to abstention.
We'll let you know when you can talk.
Thank you.
I'll let you know.
Okay, so that's what you're telling me is the agenda is incorrect.
No,
No,
that's the 30th.
Well, there's two meeting minutes in here.
right.
December 16th and December 30th. The agenda says October 29th and December 16th.
Correct.
Yes, in that packet. But we're not you didn't want to do the 30th as a vote, but just October
We don't
and
have-
December 16th.
The meeting didn't occur in the 30th. There's no
Right.
reason to vote on it. Okay,
Right.
fine.
I don't know. I think it was important that we did have this whole kind of lengthy discussion about what should happen or what shouldn't, because we accidentally didn't publicize it. And so I guess I kind of like that the idea of voting on the fact that, we all agree that's what happened. And I think it is part of the official record. I mean,
Well, I have a motion and a second to accept what should be the meeting minutes of December 30th, correct?
For December,
December 16th.
we still have to approve December 16th.
Okay. Motion.
That was my motion, was to approve the December 16th.
Got it, and seconded.
Seconded.
By
Curran.
Kern.
Any further comments on December 16th?
Yes.
Not hearing any. Denise?
Yes.
Kern,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Josh, I think you already said you abstained, correct? Brian
Yes.
and Allison.
And I'm sorry for confusing things. My comment was about December 30th, so
I know it was. It's all right, Allison. I'm a little confused.
I may have been responsible for the confusion. Sorry.
No problem. And you said yes, Allison?
Mhm.
And Bob, yes, also. Thank you. So that's, and we won't address the 30th, or at least we can, but we don't have to.
We don't have to.
There is a meeting minutes of the board wants to approve it. They're welcome to do so, but I don't think it's necessary for a meeting that didn't occur.
Well, since you weren't there, it maybe doesn't feel important to you. But since the rest of us wrestled with it so much, what the right thing to do was, I kind of liked the idea of it being part of the official record, just because it was confusing.
I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes for December 30th, 2020.
Can it be an
So moved.
official, can it be an official meeting without a quorum?
No,
I didn't think so.
We had a quorum. We didn't have, we all decided that it hadn't been publicized sufficiently.
So
No.
that we had two,
That was the
the
meeting
23rd?
before. That was the 16th. We didn't publicize it. The 30th, we didn't have a
The
quorum.
30th, we didn't have a quorum, so
Yes.
we do not need to approve
that's
that.
correct. We didn't have representation from Hope.
Right.
and the meeting on the 23rd just never happened.
That's right.
Scheduled, but it,
Right.
That's-
That was the 16th meeting. On the 16th, I believe we scheduled a meeting for the 23rd,
right.
which I knew I could be part of. And then I realized for
Right.
why I wasn't there that the 30th, which nobody ever discussed, that I had a previous commitment.
Right.
That, so it
Right.
was the 30th meeting that there wasn't a quorum, but we had scheduled a meeting for the 23rd on the 16th.
Right, but that meeting never even tried to have that meeting.
Exactly.
That is correct. So we
Sorry.
that's all right. That's all right. Let's move on because we're
Correct.
putting the wheels on
Yeah.
on meeting minutes. Mike, thank you for providing your manager report, even though it's an unscheduled meeting, unscheduled regular meeting. Does anybody have any questions for Mike on his facility manager report? Not hearing any. Mike, do you want to make any comment or emphasis on your facility management report for our edification?
Nope. We are, I will say that we are keeping our heads down. We're staying safe and healthy, both employees and community. And we're plugging along. I will say the volume is still heavy. We are still very busy. But with our, the staffing we have, we're handling it, and we're doing okay.
Good.
So.
All right, onward to our.
I've got a quick question, Mike. The last meeting on the 16th, you talked about furloughs. Could you update us? Is there any updates on that?
Sure. Yeah, we have 5 guys on furlough.
Okay, so
three-
it all happened.
Yes, 3 part-time, 2 full-time.
Okay.
And that's all moving ahead.
Okay,
Yeah, no problem.
perfect. Thank you.
Perfect.
Sure.
Thank you, Mike.
No problem. The next agenda item is to discuss and or approve our fiscal year 21-22 budget. And the budget is in the packet. So are there any comments on the budget, which I know I was not involved, but I have reviewed it, but in a previous meeting, but any other comments on the budget from the board? Brian.
Question probably to somebody on the finance committee, and the meeting that we discussed the budget, I had looked at it, but hadn't really delved into it. I guess my real only question is and there again, Mike, this is nothing personal. I'm just questioning where did the over 12% increase come from on the manager's salary from 80 to 90? How did that arrive? I guess would be my question to someone on the finance committee.
That is part of his
Excuse me?
fact. I'm trying to pull that up right now.
Mhm.
I'm still stuck on the old pack,
Mhm.
the newer packet, but that's part of his, from 88 to 90. Is
Well,
the,
I see from 80 to 90 on my budget in front of me.
oh, that's when we hired him.
The FY 21 shows 80,325, and the FY 22 from manager and the finance committee says 90,218.
Which is over a 12% increase. So just questioning, well, how did that arrive, or where is that typical, or what's the basis? But and there again, everything that I've seen and heard from Mike and people that I've talked to, he's done an outstanding job. So this is not anything personal. Just I'm questioning,
Good question, Brian.
particularly in this year, how did we go to a 12% increase?
Well, Mike's salary wouldn't have been budgeted for this fiscal.
Yeah, I was going to say this.
So we budgeted before we hired him.
But this is a budget amount. It doesn't reflect Mike's current salary. Is that correct?
Exactly.
That's it's a budgeted amount. Should this board decide to do anything with managerial salaries, we have the wherewithal to do so or not. Does that make sense, Brian?
Sort of.
Brian, I'll also say there was some formulas built into previous budgets that I left alone and didn't play with. I didn't mess with my own salary,
right,
so to speak. So
no, that's always
I
good.
just
That's
sort of
always
left
good
them
not to.
and carried along, formulas that had already existed. So
Okay, no, I'm not questioning you in any way. I look at the performing, and for 2021 is 80,325, and then 2022 is 92,118. So let me ask you, Mike, maybe when you were hired, what did you think your salary was? Or what were you told your salary was for this year that we're in, so to speak?
I was hired at 85.
At 85. Okay,
That's what I was hired at.
Okay, so the budgeted amount for 21, we're over that basically, right? If we budgeted 80 and we're paying you 85, we're right?
Yeah, so and that wouldn't have been his decision when we
Right.
went through a lengthy process of, we tried to find somebody that would work out at the budgeted salary and sort of in the realm of what we had been paying people, and basically we're unsuccessful with that, and determined that in order to get a person of his caliber, that we would
Correct.
pay more.
That's correct.
And I also understood that part of the calculation was there were going to be things Mike could do that we had historically outsourced and paid for others to do. And that even though that line item was going to be more, overall, it would be a favorable impact on the budget.
Absolutely correct, Denise. There was issues with DEP and other reports that we had to do that we outsourced before that Mike was going to accomplish internally. That's correct.
Yeah, and we've historically had to deal with significant legal issues. Already that hasn't had to happen since Mike has been here. There wasn't anything written in terms of, he has to reduce expenses by 10% or whatever, because we also knew that there had been a lot of deferred things with the facility. So, an expectation to come in and save us a bunch of money on taking care of the facility, that's always going to be impossible to quantify. Mm-hmm. But we went through a lot with trying to find managers. Ultimately, it cost the facility and the taxpayers a fair amount when we hire somebody and we make a mistake, and that happened, or it wasn't a good fit, I should say. So there's been a growing recognition that this job is much more complex in some ways than even a town manager, because you have to deal with the rules of not only 4 towns, understanding municipal governance, plus all of the different skills that are needed for the environmental compliance with the DEP, just all your normal, we're not a normal transfer station. We're a remediation site with the DEP. So we've got a lot of stuff, legal stuff that we have to follow there. Then you've got to be an expert in municipal governance and learn all of that stuff. And I think in the past, we've kind of underestimated that. People have thought, oh, it's, it's the dump. So that should be slightly lower than the, a town manager. And that hasn't been great for us in the past, that philosophy.
But
So
I think Brian's question is well put, Brian. You saw a number, you saw it going up 12.5%. You should question it.
Right.
And we're catching up with, as you heard from paying Mike a market price for what he is, and then FY21 was under budget.
Right. That was my question. I had no idea, if there was negotiation when he was hired that this was
No.
going to be the increase, or how this was derived from, but what Allison is saying obviously makes sense. I now know some of the backstory.
Right.
Is it traditionally, just there again, I'm playing catch up with the, trying to learn the ins and outs here. Do we give typical raises the same to all the employees? I mean, in the town of Hope, we typically, if there is a certain percentage raise, we're not going to, say we're going to pick and choose. Well, you're going to get 3%, and you're going to get 1.5%, you're going to get 6%. How does it work at Midcoast Solid Waste? Typically, what's the history behind any type of increases? Because Beth's increase and Mike's increase wouldn't be, they're not percentage wise the same, I'm guessing.
Right. Mike, you want to address just the part about your staff and how those raises are handled, and we'll address the part about your salary.
I mean, that's a fair point. In the past, we have had significant conversations each time about what the COLA is going to be. So we have union and non-union employees.
Right.
And there's always been a discussion, okay, do we just go with what the union contract is? Do we go with, oftentimes we poll the other towns, what are you guys doing for a COLA this year? And what are you guys doing? That wasn't a part of the discussion on the finance committee that I remember this time. We were very focused on kind of the other fundamentals, but that would be a good conversation, I think, to have now.
Well, it's sort of
All right,
a little
if I
late
can,
now, but
Mike, go ahead.
Bob, Allison pretty much just answered the question. We give raises on COLA every year. 2% is pretty average, could be 3%. Also, the union guys, there are stepped increases.
Right.
There's, if you've been there 6 months, 1 year, 3 years. So that's how raises are generally given.
okay. Yeah.
And-
And to your other question, in terms of Mike, we are scheduled, part of his agreement was a 6-month review, which is due now. And we will be addressing that in February at our next meeting. As far as Mike's performance in general, I will get some information out to the board for a discussion for that meeting. And then, of course, whatever happens with any salary issues is the decision of the board.
Okay.
Any other comments, good ones like Brian's on the budget?
So what is that in terms of percentage? Looking at, so 85 to 90, is that 2%?
Excuse me?
You want to know what percentage that is?
Yeah, I mean, because we were saying that it didn't look like Beth's, Brian was saying it didn't look to him like Beth's percentage increase would correspond with Mike's percentage increase. So were those calculated off of a percent?
That's a 5% increase.
And so we're leaving room for the possibility of an additional.
We're providing latitude for decision-making so we don't have to go around in circles if we decide to do anything.
But Beth's increase
Beth's
would be,
isn't 5%.
but Beth's is 2% then?
That is based on the COLA. Yeah.
Okay.
And I would have to look, she may have a step increase in there as well. I believe she may be hitting that, whether it's a 10-year, a 9-year, 10-year, whatever that may be. But I think she's a step increase in there.
And that would be in accordance with the personnel policy, which is
Yes.
what we follow for.
Yep.
And just to touch upon the COLA increase, you say sometimes you go with the union increase, sometimes you go with a straight. Where are the COLA increases coming from? Meaning, like the cost of living increase nationally this year is 1.3%. That's what our seniors are getting for a COLA increase this year. So where typically do you get the COLA increase if it doesn't come from the union
So-
side?
If it doesn't come from the union side, because the union is 2% or whatever the, I'm sorry, I've got some things popping up here. And I have to look at the language. It's 2% or whatever the national average increase may be. And the employee policy typically kind of follows that. We've been historically 2% from my understanding.
And this is for obviously I realize I've dealt with the schools long enough to know that the unions, it's hard to fight City Hall with the unions.
Right.
But as
So-
far as non-union workers, we just have
We have
you or two?
Three. There's three, including me would be four.
Okay.
So there's three non-union workers on the staff.
Okay. But we typically, for the non-union workers, follow the union COLA increase, or there's just a 2% across the board regardless of what the union does?
Historically, my understanding is 2%.
Okay.
It has been 2%. I haven't been there long enough to see any changes either to the union contract or, other
Right.
fluctuations in the labor market. So,
Okay.
but my understanding, looking past past documents, it's been 2%.
Yeah, I mean, we generally never want to, penalize anybody for not being in the union or to, create that kind of a scenario. So if anything, the discussions that I've seen in the past would have contemplated maybe even a larger increase for non-union employees, but I've only ever seen that contemplated, never in this organization at least, never actually enacted. But I advocated in Camden last year for a 0% COLA. So I certainly think it's a reasonable discussion to have.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's reasonable that you have to look at things on a year-by-year basis, because obviously some years are good, some years aren't good, and you have to look at the reality of what's going on in the world. I mean, we're talking about, kids are getting, every kid at the school is getting free lunch this year because there's somebody out there saying people can't afford for our kids to eat. So everybody qualifies for free lunch. So obviously things are different this year than they've ever been in any of our lifetimes. So I think going forward, you have to look at things, and obviously the union negotiation, that's a whole different ball game when it comes to what, those type of negotiations. Typically they have the money and the right attorneys behind them to be able to negotiate to get kind of what they want. At least that's the way it's worked with the schools. I'll just use the town of Hope. We don't have a lot of money to, and we don't have an expert to negotiate teachers' salaries. So typically, it's you give more than, one side tends to give more than the other, and there's not a lot you can do about that. But I think if we have 4 employees that aren't union, and you could say, well, it's not fair, but if I'm not a union employee, that's my deal. I chose to apply for that job, and I chose not to be a union employee, and that's potentially because I'm not in the union, this is what comes along with that. I'm not guaranteed the same rights and privileges that somebody that's in a union might have or get. So I think looking at this sort of thing on an annual basis is important.
Sure.
And anyway,
let's
It's
move.
also a good way to make people want to join, you know.
Let's, unless you have any other questions in this regard, Brian, let's move on to any other questions we have or recommended changes to the budget. Any other board members?
Bob, is this the time to talk about the amount for the subsection under this vote for the reallocation of funds prior to voting on that? Should that be done first? Or?
Any recommendations for changes should be discussed now.
Okay, with the reallocation of funds from the equipment replacement reserve to the facility improvement reserve, my notes from when we discussed the budget, and I don't have the date, but it said 20 to 30,000. I think it's important to get that right out on the table so that we know exactly what we're going to reallocate and for what. We do have a new board member that I think really should hear that and the reasons why. And probably that's a Mike thing. I don't know.
Just be clear, are you talking about a change from what we're seeing on paper here for that allocation?
This is 4A in the agenda, I think.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah, but I wondered, Denise, if that should be done before we vote on the budget.
Right. Do we have to have that answer first, and then that's part of what the overall budget vote?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. That was
Yes,
my question.
absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, it could come during discussion, but then that requires a modification to motion. If we can circumvent that, it would be better. So yes, discuss it now.
yeah, so it's definitely connected to the budget. So it's difficult to talk about that without talking about the budget. But if we were to not do this, then that would change, could potentially change the budget. So the basic short story of this is that we've got a lot more money in the equipment replacement reserve than we do in the facility improvement reserve. Historically, that has just been funded on a more regular basis, or perhaps before I was paying attention, they just drew down the facility improvement reserve more. But what we found is that rather than having significant anticipated needs for replacing equipment like loaders and balers and things like that, due to the fact that we deferred a lot of the facility improvements with the hopes that we were going to do like a $2 million redesign at one point, a lot of stuff got left behind. And so now there are a lot of, now that we've decided to really more just commit to the way things are and just improve that a little bit, there are a lot of things that we're going to need to pay for, like roads and general facility improvements. And so rather than charging that to the taxpayers, we'd like to be able to use reserve funds to pay for that.
So what is the suggested proposal for how much money to be transferred, as I'm hearing it, from equipment reserve to facility reserve?
Bob, that total is going to be $70,000 transferred. Originally, we had proposed during these budget meetings with the finance committee, $50,000 for facility roadway repair. If you've been there, when you're driving through, there's some grading and some repaving that needs to be done.
Right.
In that conversation, if we're going to do that regrading, we ought to replace the leachate line that transfers leachate from the landfill to the odor control building and ultimately to Camden.
Right.
I have spoken with the DEP about reimbursement of the funding for that leachate line. The DEP has denied that request.
Okay.
The quote is $18,000 to $20,000 to replace that line.
Okay.
So I've upped the $50,000 original request to $70,000 to cover the leachate line improvement and the regrading project.
Okay. So if we are taking 70,000 from equipment reserve to increase facility reserve, what does that bring our equipment reserve down to?
We currently have 211,000 in equipment reserve.
Okay, so you're taking that down 70, so you're down to $141,000 in the equipment reserve account, and well, facility reserve will be increased by $70,000.
Yes.
Any comments, other board directors? Okay, so currently, just to be clear, because I'm just running for the right line here, whatever motion we make should include this correction or change. Okay. Anything else of this nature in the budget?
Well, so do we want to
Yes.
do this? I mean,
Say again, what?
all right. Does everybody feel comfortable about this? I agree with Kern that we probably should vote on this before we vote budget.
Well, you can, or you can, if there's no tremendous amount of objection, we can just include it in the motion to accept the
Yeah,
budget.
include it in the motion. I think we'll be fine. I just wanted to clarify
Well, that's
how much
perfect.
it was.
Motion to approve the budget, including
Yes.
Right.
reallocation.
Yeah, this is, I'm writing it down. This will be approving the budget as posted with this modification. Now I'm just asking other modifications we want to make to the budget.
Yeah, I think from an auditing perspective, what we had talked about before is that it really should be separate. And this was from conversations when, unfortunately, we don't have our town managers here with us, but Bill Post and Dave Kinney were part of our finance committee discussions. And the idea was that it was definitely cleaner to approve this as something separate. It's a transfer of funds that would go into effect immediately. We haven't budgeted to spend anything until the next fiscal year, but that it should be a separate motion from.
What I'm hearing you saying is we're suggesting this reserve be changed effective today.
Yeah.
Yes, there's no reason
Okay.
not to do it. But
If that is true, then you are correct. I was assuming we were making the modification to the budget sheets. If this modification is to today's books, then it should be made separately.
Yes, and I would argue that it should, because there are lots of things coming up in the facility that we may need.
That's perfectly legitimate, because a reserve is a reserve account. It's not necessarily connected to a fiscal year. So given that, I would entertain a motion to make exactly this change.
I'll make that motion. I move to reallocate funds in the amount of $70,000 from the Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation Equipment Replacement Reserve to the Facility Improvement Reserve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Roll call vote. Allison?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Cindy? She waves yes. I can see her going like that. Denise?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Kern?
Yes.
And Bob, yes. Thank you very much. So back to our budget conversation then. Are there any other comments on the budget as published in our packet? We'll get to one in a minute, but in terms of what's presented, because we do have a discussion on the agenda about some allocation of funds for special use. But as far as the budget that you all did review on December, I believe it was the 16th, are there any more comments on that budget as it stood? Seeing a lot of no's, no raising hands. But we have on our agenda a discussion about a allocation of funds. Let me get the right language here, so I don't misquote. Hold on a second.
But that's,
There is a potential for a motion to reallocate funds. We already discussed that.
we
But
just
there was-
voted on that.
Yeah, we already spoken on that one, but I believe, well, is there anything else?
So I was seeing the, are you talking about the setting aside of
Yes.
funds for
Yes.
diversion and educational purposes? So I would
Yes.
see that as definitely part of the budget.
It definitely is.
I didn't see that on our agenda as a separate item.
It's not on the agenda as a separate item. You're absolutely correct. I thought it was. But I confused it with the reserve discussion. But yes, the budget as is, are there any other recommended modifications to the budget as it stands right now in our packet?
So is this where we would talk about
Yes.
what amount we'd set aside for the education?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There has been discussion about the possibility of allocating some funds in this fiscal year, 21-22, for, well, yet to be defined, specific definition of some funds for education, proactivity, because of the current situation with the landfill, and let's open that up to discussion now.
Well, I'm a huge fan of spending some money on food waste education. I mean, when you look, EPA's got some amazing statistics about the percentage of municipal solid waste that is food waste. And that's going to be one of the biggest changes moving from an incineration model to a landfill model. The amount of methane that'll be generated by that food waste is a huge quantity of greenhouse gases. So I think that that's something that the community, you could get the high school, there's just people throw away food without thinking about it. And we have, we have scrap dogs. We have the ability to not have to throw away food, not just save money on your yellow bags, but really help out the environment. So I would be in favor of some sort of program, and EPA's got a ton of information on it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be invented from whole cloth.
Isn't there a line item from community outreach?
Yes. 10105.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah, the outreach coordinator would be 10105. I'm sorry, that's not the same thing.
Right. There's 10105 or 06, community committee projects.
I had it just a moment ago.
Be more a general one.
Yeah, and that's 6,000 under that line.
Say that again.
There's, it looks like there's 6,000 that was budgeted for community committee projects. And
Right.
is that the line it would fall under? I'm guessing.
It's where I would put it.
That's where I would put it, Brian.
Is that enough, or do we, or Mike, what do you think? Allison, do you have vetted this budget? Do you think it needs more?
Yeah, so I didn't choose to discuss any of this as part of our finance committee discussions because it's really more of a philosophical board question. And so I didn't make my pitch to the finance committee to include it there, but to look back a little bit on our discussions of what to do with our waste, when we made the decision to go to the landfill, that really wasn't taken lightly. And I think we all remember how at the beginning when we looked at our possible contracts between either EcoMaine or the Municipal Review Committee, nobody was even considering a contract with Crossroads Landfill. It was considered like something that we wouldn't do. It wasn't taken into consideration. It falls at the lowest rung of the waste hierarchy. And so it wasn't even considered. This time around, when we looked at how difficult some of our options were and how expensive it would be to continue doing what we're doing right now with EcoMaine, we all decided that the environmental benefits of continuing to do what we're doing with EcoMaine weren't sufficient to warrant paying an additional $100,000 a year. But the only reason that I could even, consider suggesting or supporting that our communities do the least recommended thing for our waste was with the idea that we were going to be saving so much money that we could actually take a portion of that and reallocate it to some of our own education programs and waste diversion activities. One of the things that EcoMaine has done is they've provided numerous small grants to our schools, which some of them do exactly what you're talking about, Denise. There've been composting programs at the high school. Lincolnville School got a grant. There have been a few of them. And so, and that was a big selling point for the communities when they decided to go with EcoMaine. I think we were all really impressed by what they offer. EcoMaine's been in all of the schools. We've spent tremendous energy educating the community about incineration. My kids have come home with packets explaining, the waste to energy process and why that's beneficial. And so to all of a sudden now tell the community, all right, if you throw your plastic away now, there is not going to be that added benefit if you get to tell yourself, oh, it's making some electricity. The same thing with food waste. Of course, the incinerator doesn't want food waste really either, but it's a much bigger issue now that it's going to be, it's going to the landfill. And so I think some of the schools have come to expect that they could apply for these small grants and educational opportunities with EcoMaine. So we're going to be taking that away from them. And so the hope is that since we have a manager now who I really believe can do some cool stuff, that we could be in a position to fund some small grants that the schools would apply for, and that we can do some serious food waste education. I don't think we can hammer out tonight exactly the details of it, but that if we set aside, my thought would be that we would set aside the amount that we're expecting to reduce the assessments. Right now we have a budgeted decrease in the assessments to towns. We all know that's probably not realistic in the long run. We're either going to have to, any disposal option that comes after Crossroads is going to be more expensive for us. In fact, this one's going to get more expensive over time. So bag fees are going to have to go up, or town assessments are going to have to go up. But at this moment, we're in a position of being able to go back to all the towns and say, you give us a little bit less money this year. So if we were to take that difference, which Mike, do you have that offhand? What?
21,000.
Exactly. 28.98.
So it was 28.
20,898.
Okay, so $20,000. So
21.
Okay.
And I do think it's important that we, one of the things we talked about with Dave St. Laurent is even kind of making it clear in the budget. We did save a massive amount of money with this Crossroads thing. And so pulling it out and having something separate in the budget that says, I don't know whether it needs, I don't really like the idea of putting it in committee projects, because that's something different. I would like it to sort of reflect that we're doing something different this year. And so because of that, there is a new line item that says, waste diversion and educational programs, or we could call it the, landfill impact offset.
Right. Well, right now we have 101.18, which is seminar training. What you're suggesting is don't use the same terminology. Let's create a 101.22, which doesn't exist right now, and call it something. We can decide that. And then the board needs to decide is, one, whether we do it or not, and two, what the amount should be. What I'm hearing is if we do 21,000, there is no net change year to year to the town assessments, correct? Mike and Allison, correct? If that is not substantial, we can go to $30,000 as a round number, and let the facility manager determine over the next fiscal year how this should be allocated and spent or not. It comes down to a couple of questions, and frankly, the difference between $21,000 and $30,000 to the assessments of our town is $9,000. That's not a heck of a lot of money. So it really comes down to how, and it's well within the band of what Allison mentioned about the amount of, I don't call it savings, I call it a differentiation in the two market decisions we had to make. which was not the preferred decision, and everybody knows that. We've already discussed it ad infinitum, and it's very true, but we agreed to go that route. So I would like to hear the board talk about whether or not they would feel comfortable with creating this new account at $30,000. Mike can come back to the board with how these funds might be expended as we go forward into the fiscal year. And its net effect on the bottom line of town assessments is $9,000. That's not a lot of money. And frankly, given the decision we had to make, which was, well, frankly, uncomfortable for all of us, but it was a smart decision. Comments, Wendy?
I have a couple of questions, a little slow on the uptake, I'm sure. What the purpose of this new line, what the actual goal is to do with that. And also, we've got community committee projects and an allotment there. And then down below, we've got communications and public outreach. Now, those, they sound like they would be, you know, maybe overlapping or something. I mean, the similar kind of purposes.
Mhm. Good question, Wendy.
Because together that's a $5,000 and a $6,000.
Right. So it's 11,000 total.
Oh, exactly.
Mike, how are those utilized? And can you comment on how those are utilized in terms of what we're discussing for this other additional amount?
The community projects line was, I believe Mike just carried that across.
I can't hear you.
That was supposed, the community projects was, has been the swap shop. That was what, a lot of that was discussions with Baridi and some before that. I don't know if Mike had something different in mind, but there are some things that need to happen with the swap shop. I don't know if anybody's seen that little building that it's been in, but it's completely falling apart and needs to be moved into.
In the communications public outreach account line item that Wendy questioned, which is
That was 10117.
Yes,
Yeah, as well.
$5,000.
Yeah.
Any comments, Mike, Allison?
That in the past has been some, I'm trying to look and see what's under there right now, but
Yeah.
when we need to do, isn't that where advertising is also?
10117 is a public hearing, advertising, employment ads, RFP ads. There are three numbers that add up to that $5,000.
Yeah, so that adds up quickly every time we have to put something in.
And more to
Village
the point, it's totally separate than what we're talking about here in my mind. We're talking about, as I'm hearing it, we're talking about some discretionary funds to apply to proactive activities from the landfill, Midco solid waste to the public regarding recycling, you know, outreach, everything from, I agree with Denise, more outreach on organics and et cetera. Those kinds of things need to be, we need to do some work in that regard. Now, I think it's important to understand too that well, the board needs to decide whatever funds we put into this idea, we're not going to define it tonight. But we're just going to allocate a stipend, an amount to put into that account. And you'd be admonished to go off and come back with, this is where we're going with these funds and how we're expending or not expending it. Correct?
So reviving recycling program is what you're going to, is the potential use of this new line you're creating, it sounds like?
It's
You
more
mentioned
than
recycling, so I thought that was.
It's more of outreach to make, you know, I'm hearing as recycling of all kinds more efficient, more effective, and more public information. Perhaps outreach to, I heard Allison mention the term grants for the schools to do something that we're not getting because we're not dealing with entities we would love to have dealt with, but we're not.
So creating a more robust program
Yes.
for recycling, is that what you'd be defining it as?
More robust program.
Well, yeah, I don't consider food waste recycling in the same, I don't know that people would consider it. To me, it's different. It's reuse. I mean, you know, it's doing something more positive with the material rather than filling yellow bags with it. But
Right.
I think it might be confusing if we call it recycling.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think it's
What are you gonna
important.
call it, so I can just understand
The version, I mean,
that
it's,
$30,000 amount you're talking about to do it with?
I think it's important for us to carry on what we have reaped the benefits of with Eco Maine. It's unfortunate that that's not going to continue. And I think it's very important to do that. The outreach to the schools, the communities, the grants and things of that nature, full well knowing we're not going to be able to hit it 100%. But I think it's important that our customers, our towns know that we're going to continue that. It comes at a price. The concern that I have is with the times being the way that they are, my goal is to flatline our budget to the towns at a minimum. I don't want to have a conversation with any one of our towns of why our budget went up. I'm proud of what we've done because of the reduction and all of that. I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to continue the programs that Eco Maine offered to us, to our schools, to our communities and things of that nature, because it did bring in a lot of things to our landfill or to Midco Solid Waste. We're moving, to coming in, coming out or whatever, but it's got people thinking about recycling, and no, we don't want to throw food away. We do have scrap dogs. That's my opinion on that. I'm really concerned if we turn to the towns and say, this isn't flatline, because of the way things are nowadays. I'm good with going to them and saying there's no increase from last year. This is what we're doing. We've got a change in our, in the facility that's taking our garbage. There was a savings, but we got to do this because with change, there are things that go away. We want to continue this because this is important for all of our communities. That's the conversation I want to have with our town, at least.
So if we have 6,000 in these community projects and then another 21,000 from the decrease in assessments, are those in the same category as the 6,000?
I'm not
it
sure.
could be, the swap shop is an existing program that needs some.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
some bolstering, but
Yeah, I think the community committee projects, 6,000, we need to leave alone.
Okay, that's not for this.
Yeah, right. And then the community outreach, public outreach is 5,000. It's not really public outreach. What it is allocation of funds, as I mentioned earlier, for public hearing, advertising, for employment ads and RFP ads. There are three separate items that add up to $5,000. You could debate those by a few dollars, but that's what those are.
That's different. Yeah.
Those separate. Go ahead, Josh.
Brian was first.
Oh, Brian first.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
Two parts. The 6,000 for the community projects. Did we spend all of that this year? And if not, what if we spent 3 or 4, or 1? Can we roll that ahead? And the second part is I'm in agreement with spending some money that Allison is talking about. However, I'm not a big fan of putting this lump sum out there and having, you're saying to me, okay, I need some money. This is what I kind of want to do with it, but I really don't have a plan. So a year from now, I don't want to say, well, we took 30, but we only spent 7. So, we have 23 that we just took and we didn't do anything with. I would be more in favor of sort of some middle ground here. And then in 6 months or 8 months from now, Mike comes back to us and says, okay, this is specifically what we need to spend for money and how we're going to spend it, rather than, I like the premise of the education, but I think we need to have a little more specifics instead of just arbitrarily saying, let's just take this lump sum and we have no idea what this lump sum will fund. So it's a little odd to me that we're throwing out $20,000, $30,000 and we have zero idea as to how that would get spent.
That's why I made the comment, good point, Brian, the comment that whatever funds we allocate, they should be predicated that how they're going to be spent needs to be brought back to the board
Right.
for discussion, because I would agree, this is not a blank check for anybody to go running off and designing a new flag to fly over our various towns for recycling, exaggerating. But and to your question, Brian, about, I'm going to go back here. In terms of those accounts you mentioned, communications, public outreach last year was over $6,000, and it was budgeted at $5,000.
Right. Well, I would recommend that I wasn't questioning that line. I was questioning the committee projects because it appears in there again, to the layman, the 10117, I would guess that it was what people thought it was, but really it's just advertising. So it should be totally renamed just for the layman that happens to look at this budget, because it's misleading that that's communications and public outreach, because as I read that, I would think, well, we're going into the schools, we're giving people, the skinny on what's happening and where they should go and what they should do, when in fact, we're paying Village Soup to run an ad for us.
Right.
Exactly, Brian. It's labeled wrong. It is public notification.
Yeah, it is.
As a point of order, a lot of that was going to be for when we did the transition, and if we made all that change, we would need a lot more education about that. That's why it was labeled that way.
Let's not beat that horse. It needs to be renamed. I would agree with Brian. The community committee projects was, in fact, not spent at the $6,000 level. It was less than $1,000. So to your point, it wasn't spent, and again, why we could get into. But I think the question at hand fundamentally is to the board is there any amount we were willing to put on the table for consideration to be spent in this regard for training / the things we've mentioned in this budget, but it should be qualified that the facility manager needs to come back to the board and explain what programs are being considered. Because I think it is important that we do as much as we can to do these elements that I think Alice has mentioned and Mike has mentioned and others of you. The question is, what do you feel? Would you feel comfortable with putting some stipend in this budget? And to Kern's comment was, let's go as far as not $30,000, let's go up to the $21,000, which is keeping the town's assessment flat going forward, or more. But that's the discussion on the table right now. Allison.
I just want to quickly say, I don't want the record to be that we have no idea how this would be used, because part of what I would, I do think some of it should be flexible and allow the manager to develop what he thinks might work best. But one aspect of this is that I want to continue to have these small grant opportunities be available to the schools. So the way that's worked with EcoMaine is that schools and community groups actually can apply for funds. They outline in their proposal what they plan to do with it, how it relates to education, waste management, and then EcoMaine has decided whether that's a worthy use of funds or not. So in that by that same token, Mike and whatever whoever else he deems or the board deems would continue to be able to accept these proposals. I don't think that would use the whole amount of the entirety of that money, but my hope is to continue with this, because I don't think that everybody, all the teachers that had applied for things before or were considering applying, I don't think all of them are aware that that opportunity is about to go away. And so,
well, we have a bi-monthly meeting schedule, not bi-monthly meetings, and monthly we have a facility manager report. And in that report should be detailed to the board where whatever funds are allocated are considered to be going to be allocated as we go forward. That should be a line item in the facility manager report. It's a way to accomplish what you're saying, Allison, without having to go through a formal approval of the board. That I could live with if the rest of the board can. But I think those logistics, I think we can work out. We obviously trust Mike, and we can know, I think he has an idea of where he wants to do going
Sure.
forward. I trust that.
Yeah, Bob, we have a lot of ideas, but none of the costs have been quantified yet.
Exactly.
The phone calls haven't been made. We don't have any quotes. We don't know what we're doing, but we know what we want to do.
Right. And
So yeah, it's just doing the legwork.
In your facility manager report should keep us up to date every month, in the wrong meeting bi-monthly, with what activity is being planned, what's being evaluated, what's being looked at for the allocation potential use of these funds. That'll allow the board to step up if they see something going awry, which I doubt, frankly, but just in case. Well, fundamentally, I think it's a good point. I don't want to restrict Mike. I don't think we should from being proactive here. But we're back to the one, should we? And if we should, what should be the amount of funds we should allocate? Brian.
Quick question. Historically, do we carry forward line items historically in any of these budgets ever?
Not very often, especially when we go over in other lines. It's been, I mean, we could, if we get to the end of this year, we could say, okay, that community projects line didn't get spent because the swap shop didn't open, and so there's 5,000 left.
Yeah, it's
in
not
there. But unfortunately, the history has been that some of our enough of our lines are way over or way under that it doesn't end up making sense at the end of the year to be that precise.
Can I follow up with?
But just, Brian, before you jump to the next question, bottom line is Midco Solid Waste is a zero-based budgeting operation.
Right. Okay. But historically, can we move money anywhere we want in this? Meaning, if I'm a citizen right now and I'm, I have a copy of the budget and I'm watching us vote on this tonight, and we're voting to spend, $10,000 on X and this and that. And that doesn't get spent, and we end up spending it on D as opposed to X. Is it just free reign here as to how, do we have just basically a bottom dollar? And even though what we've budgeted, what we've made specifics, in the end, we can spend anything we see. This is a learning curve for me, because the schools can somewhat do that, but municipalities can't.
Well, the municipalities have a 10% limit on expenditures on the budget line item. Is there allowed to spend?
Well, for instance, in Hope, we have cost centers. So we can spend within that cost center, but we can't move it from one cost center to another cost center. So I guess what I'm asking, do we just have one big cost center here and we move it wherever we need to move it?
Good question.
We have so much more power on this board than any of us have on our talking, actually. We get to send assessments in a similar way that the school sends assessments. So the manager shouldn't be spending from a line that, moving things around. It should require board approval, but we definitely have broad
a broad brush.
authority
It's
to
very different from our towns, Brian, to answer your question.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure this all out here. So in my head, I know going forward what we can do and what we can't do here.
Questions understood. But back to the core issue here, we need to focus on this issue at hand, which is the allocation of a certain quantity of funds for the issues we discussed. As the board, I'm hearing for the most part support, but I'm not hearing any step up and let's recommend X, Y, or Z.
I thought Kern's suggestion was reasonable.
Kern was very clear. He recommended basically $20,898, which is a difference between almost $21,000 between the which would keep the assessments the same as last year. Correct, Kern?
You're muted.
Muted, Karen.
You're muted, Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct, Bob. That's what I would like to do. I'd like to keep it flatline, but I would like to put some money in there to
Okay.
try to do that. Keep
Other
those
comments,
programs going.
other comments, board members, Josh?
Yeah, sorry. By the way, I keep getting kicked off. I'm in Camden tonight, and my internet is less reliable tonight than it has been in Lincolnville. So,
That'll teach you.
I'm in support of funding this. I think 21,000 to keep the budget flatline is very reasonable. I have a suggestion. We could make a new line called waste reduction education. Kind of incorporates recycling as well as increasing food diversion, something of that nature. But yeah, I think it's a good idea considering we're moving down on the waste hierarchy to landfilling. So we should have
I like
some
that
education.
title because it's an investment in sort of better finances for the facility, really. If we can use
And Josh, that was waste reduction, what?
Education.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then Brian.
I will be in support of this if a year from now, because we're kind of going sort of blind here because we're throwing a dollar amount into something that we have no idea what it will cost, that a year from now or 11 or 10 months from now, that this is a line that if we don't say, if we put 21,000 in and we use 3, and we typically would then take that 18 and it would go in the general, we don't carry forward, that we carry this forward if we're going to, I think this probably we can all agree is a continuing line. This isn't just once in a lifetime thing here. And that we carry this unused money, because I'm guessing there's going to be some unused money here because we have no program, we have no anything yet. And I'm assuming Mike is a busy guy anyway, and this sort of thing in my mind is going to take a few minutes to line things up and figure things out.
Okay.
And obviously we're not trying to make more work for him, but this is something that I can imagine if I'm being taxed to do this, to work with the schools and the communities, come up with a program, come up with pricing, it's going to take a few minutes. So this isn't something somebody does in an hour on a Saturday, figures it all out.
A good point, Brian, but remember, this is July 1st, 2021 budget. He's got 6 months to start working on it.
Right.
So it isn't like he has to do it overnight. And as long as line items go, we said this is zero-based budgeting. We can revisit this every year to carry it forward if we want to, or increase it or decrease it. So that's kind of a given in the budgeting cycle we have at Midco Solid Waste.
Okay.
Allison.
But this is a little bit different type of a budget line. So I definitely support that sort of commitment now to carry it forward, because otherwise since we do have such sort of broad authority to move things around, it's very easy for things just to get budgeted and then be like, well, it just ended up paying for all of our deficits somewhere else and our failure to plan. So I like that point of sort of committing now that if it doesn't get used to carry it forward for that purpose. And
I would just caution that we don't know what the economic environment will be in the next year, and we should have the flexibility to move in any direction if we have to on any line item. We shouldn't restrict or commit to any line item on a zero-based budgeting basis.
I think it's more of a philosophical discussion right now that it wouldn't.
Very philosophical, but right now we're dealing with the FY 21-22 budget, and that's what we need to decide tonight.
We won't actually be restricted from making a different decision at some other time. We would still be able to do something different, but just kind of having that in our own minds right now, I think is important.
Okay, can I get a motion from the board on this matter?
Wendy has a question.
Well, it's sort of it's an opinion, it's a comment, I guess you could say. And that would be that I would like to see us look at that as something that not yet begun or not yet in place, to fund it low and then bring it high. So when we can always add to it later, But if it's just getting started, I think that not knowing how robust this is going to be as far as funding, that whatever that program you decide, just start it small, and when it becomes really successful or productive or cost saving, we can grow it. But it's less likely that we would shrink it, as my concern. So where we haven't gotten the all the background and all the details of what it would end up costing, I'd like to see us start small and watch it grow.
Okay.
And that would be
Again,
that'd be my opinion.
okay, thank you very much. Understand.
Conservative opinion.
I need a motion from the board so we can have a discussion and drive this for a conclusion.
I move that we allocate 21,000 to the, I didn't write down the title, Waste Reduction Education Fund in the 2021 budget for Midcoast Solid Waste.
I think it's 21-22.
21-22.
Let me ask this before we, okay, we can act on that modifications to this. Remember, this budget hasn't been approved yet by the board. So we could either got two choices. We could, unless there are other discussion, we can approve this budget with that modification, or we can take them in two pieces. But I suggest we take the budget as a whole with this modification.
Okay, I withdraw my motion
And restate.
and restate that we approve the 21-22 proposed budget with the addition of a line item of $21,000 for waste reduction education.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Brian.
Wendy makes a good point. We have a line that we funded last year at $6,000 for similar things of what we're talking about. We've only used 1,000 of the 6,000. I would like to amend that. I'll make a motion to amend it to double the line from 6,000 to 12,000. Because I somewhat agree with Wendy that we can always add to this. And it's been in my experience in budgets that once something is funded, it usually never goes the other way. It always usually goes up. So because we don't have any specifics, we're going to go from 6 to 22. Why don't we double the 6 and see where we are 6 months from now?
That's just sorry.
Allison.
This proposal was to create a new line for this purpose. The other line is for swap shop needed improvements that might contain anything from the crumbling loading dock around the swap shop area that is marginally unsafe to moving the swap shop into the blue building. The swap shop was unable to open because of COVID, but it's a phenomenally popular community asset. So I don't want to really.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a bit confused. The swap shop isn't under the umbrella of the facility and facility improvements.
No.
It's under this $6,000 item is
It's
what
under
that
the
is.
6,000. Yes, Denise is correct.
So I think
Okay,
there's been some confusion about that item.
Okay, well, I'm confused. Which is very easy. So,
Yep.
so there again, I don't want to belabor the point here. So someone enlighten me. Who owns the swap shop? And what is it part of?
Allison.
It's been about 20 years ago, an outside group got the agreement of the Midcoast Solid Waste Board of Directors and Facility Manager to basically squat there and have this opportunity for people just to leave things and take things. It's evolved over the years, and one of the things that happened when we did a few years ago, we did the Waste Watch Committee did a big survey of all 4 towns. We got 1,100 responses. We asked people what they like about the facility, what they don't, what could be improved. We got a lot of comments from people saying that they wanted to see the swap shops hours expanded. They wanted to see it be open year round. And we've kind of started this long process of working with the volunteers that were existing there, who are really quite separate from the facility, and trying to bring that more under the umbrella of Midco Solid Waste so that there's a little bit of ownership. And, you know, the Midco Solid Waste manager sets the policies, and we ask the volunteers to sign volunteer agreements. And it's been a slow evolution, but we've brought on some new volunteers. We've had lots of meetings. Unfortunately, things got set back some with COVID and a bunch of managers changing and having different ideas. But that's why it was never part of what was budgeted for the facility. It was always like, we're just going to allow these swap shop people to kind of squat here, but so we're trying to improve that. So that's how it came under the table of committee projects, because the swap shop was kind of like a committee project, but it's again not very well.
Okay, so have we budgeted, is there anything in this budget or previous budgets that we have budgeted or Midco Solid Waste has budgeted for the types of things we're talking about currently? So there's been no money spent previously for any type of education before the year we're talking about.
I think what I'm understanding is that there has been, it was part of EcoMaine, our contract with EcoMaine. One of the side benefits we got within that contract were the kinds of grants and education. And we're not going to lose that because we're going with a much, much more cost-effective landfill option. But, they're going to be further downsides from going from incineration to landfill. But we have some control over how much of that education component we lose. We could build that into our budget.
Josh?
One thing to keep in mind is the hope is that we don't stay with the landfill for forever. It's a 3-year contract. It's short term. After it's expired, we can go back to looking at EcoMaine, at joining the MRC, at PERC even. I mean, we can shop around then. And so I would argue that we should increase, add this $21,000 waste reduction education fund now, because we're going to need to educate the public now since we're making the switch to the landfill. But the hope for me is that we only need it for 3 years or so. We switch to something that isn't a landfill, and then the need for it becomes less necessary, because then we're higher up on the waste hierarchy.
Brian, does that clarify what you're, and you still want to make this modified motion?
I will retract my amendment, and it does give me clarity. I did understand that we're losing the education through EcoMaine, and my question was, so that previously we've never had any type of line where we funded anything for the schools or our manager going into the schools to just, educate twice a year or any of that, anything like that. Never happened.
No, we had one time we budgeted, we were going to have a part-time recycling coordinator, and that ended up getting taken out and voted down and never funded. So
back on agenda, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Karen?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Denise?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Wendy?
No.
Allison?
yes.
Bob, yes. Fine. Motion carries. Thank you very much. All good, great questions, by the way. On to our next agenda item, which is you have, and well, not in front of you, but you have in your packet, the contract with our selected solid waste with Allison.
I'm going to bring Pete in, if does that make sense to you? He's at
Sure.
right now.
Absolutely. I didn't even know he was waiting. Thank you, Allison.
Very patient.
Yeah, he's not like me, right, Josh?
Poor guy. He was even at our last meeting.
I know. He sat through it, and we all sat there and sang songs together. but while Pete's coming, there he is. There's the man. How you doing, Pete?
I am well. How are you? Happy New Year, everyone.
Same to you. It is that time of year. Our obviously fifth and last agenda item is to vote to approve the municipal solid waste disposal contract, which is in your packet. As you know, by the way, just Mike, just to be clear for everybody, this contract form that is in our packet has been reviewed by Crossroads, by us, and by our attorney. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So with that, I open up discussion from the board. Are you waving, Allison? You get two hands up there.
Sorry, I was trying to scroll and wave at the same time. It's like rubbing your stomach and patting your head.
Okay. Okay.
So, I'm just trying to pull up exactly. There were a couple. Oh, I'm sorry. The heat is turning on in the Opera House, and it's going to be loud for just a minute. But looking for the language here. There was a part of it that said, basically, if any laws change that require, that increase operating expenses for you guys, that you can pass along those expenses to us. So that to me says, you know, I happen to think there should be some more laws, perhaps regulating landfills or doing things like that. That seemed a little bit, that was a little concerning to me, that if anything makes it more expensive for us to operate our facility because of environmental regulations or otherwise. I think it also mentioned strikes and things like that, that you can just pass along those costs to us. Can you maybe?
You're talking about the force majeure clause?
No, I'm actually not. I'm just talking that's where the labor stuff
Yes.
is mentioned, but in the, okay, so under compensation, no, it says the contractor expressly reserves the right to charge and collect from the Midco Solid Waste Corporation an equitably apportioned share of the increased cost of operating the site resulting from changes in federal, state, or local law or regulation governing the receipt, transportation, handling, or disposal of acceptable waste.
Okay.
I haven't seen that before in our other contracts and just.
Well,
Pete.
thank you. For the record, Pete LaChapelle, Waste Management, and once again, thank you. And Alice, I'm not sure how EcoMaine works on that, and I'm not sure if they were part of if they even burn demo debris, but the state of Maine passed a law that any landfill or I think any disposal of demo debris had a $2 per ton charge. Well, as a business, we can't absorb your town's costs. We're going to have to pass that on. So I guess.
We're not sending you demo debris, though.
I'm sorry?
We're not sending you demolition.
No, I'm just saying is that was part of it. But if a state comes along and says now any MSW that is disposed of is going to get a $3 per ton charge, we as a company can't absorb that cost. That needs to be passed back on to the municipality.
Will you let us out of the contract if that happens?
No, unfortunately, we won't. I mean, a contract is a contract, and we could defer it until the next budget year or something. We could talk along those lines, but it's standard practice. And I know Waste Management is very firm on that. And to back up real quick, and I've been listening for the whole meeting and heard all the comments, and I know landfill is at the bottom of the hierarchy, and right, there's arguments to both, right? Waste Management, and Mike may know this, but we used to own 26 incinerators, Wheelabrator. We sold that back in 2015. With electricity and the governance on that and the pricing fluctuation, that really wasn't in our forte. You also look at what potentially goes into an incinerator in his landfill could potentially be more toxic than what you actually threw away after you incinerate it because of all the metals and everything that's thrown away. But that's a whole separate argument. Waste Management with the landfill itself does capture that methane. And by the way, we do produce electricity. And I know, Allison, you were there. I know Bob, Mike, I think Dave St. Laurent, and and Mr. Dave Barrows, by the way, my condolences on his passing to you folks and his family, but you guys were there for a tour. So we do generate electricity and sell that back to the grid, and we provide up to 3,000 or 4,000 electricity for homes, around 3,000 to 4,000 homes. So, but as far as us absorbing that, we cannot do that. We wouldn't do that. It's not a good business practice.
I'm a little confused about where we are. Is this under 5, paragraph 5?
We're in the last agenda item, approval of the contract.
Oh, I know that, but I mean, where in the contract is the language?
It was
Second
under
page, C.
compensation. It was under 4C.
Okay,
Yeah, I see it. One second, Allison.
because there's a separate place also, which I guess it'd be interesting to see how they marry up. Because under 5, the last sentence there says the contractor may increase the charges to account for this following circumstances outside the control of the contractor, which I think is an important premise. Changes in local, state, or federal laws or regulations, imposition of taxes or fees, and act of God such as floods, fire, which is really force majeure. But so we're talking about changes in federal, state, or local law or regulation, which is also what's down under 5. So it seems almost, maybe you could clarify that for us, Pete. What is the difference between what you're capturing in 4C and 5?
It does seem, again, Pete, with waste management, again, it does seem a little redundant. I'm not an attorney, so I drafted this. This is what they put in there and approved as language. To me, it does look a little redundant because it does say up in 4C, any increases for federal, state, local law regulations, and really repeats it down below.
Right.
So,
And I like the way it's written in 5 better because it's emphasizing that it's outside of your control.
right.
That's somebody else imposing a fee that you then just are reserving the right to pass on to us, a fee that you're being charged for handling our waste.
Well, again, these fees would be a federal or state mandate, right? And
Right.
really the only one, and again, I've been with waste management now, this is my, 19th year. I've only seen one, and that was the state of Maine. New Hampshire did speak about it, year and a half ago, but really nothing's come to fruition. Because basically, if they pass that on, it's not really helping any municipality because we're going to turn around and charge the municipality back. So to me, it was a lawmaker trying to come up with something. But again, only one increase that I have seen to date in my 19 years with the company was the state of Maine. And I want to say that was back in 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there when that happened. You may know more than myself, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into something that's, to me, share of the increased cost of operating the site, when you can start to imagine what the proof would be, how you'd have to establish that to us about how it's getting very far afield and requires us to sort of understand how you're operating your site and running your business as to when you can charge us that. Whereas I think that language in 5 is if there is a change in regulations. I don't know. I mean, it's.
Well, and again, in 4C, it says the contractor expressly reserves the right to charge and collect from the MCSWC an equitable apportioned share of the increased cost of operating the site resulting from changes from federal, state, or local law or regulation governing the receipt, transportation, handling, or
That's
disposal.
really, I guess as a lawyer, I would just say that's very vague. I don't know what local law might change that you could contend. And I hear you saying this has only been invoked once.
Well, a local law would be, right, and I understand that. A local law would be if they regulate a $2 per ton fee on any MSW going into the landfill. Well, we would turn around and charge, or a federal mandate.
Right, but you're not just talking about that here. What if the local law says you've got to plow your roads or grade your road out every day? That arguably is increasing the cost of operating your facility. And the way this provision is written, you could pass that cost on to us. So it's not this very targeted, you're being charged something in addition that's directly attributable to our waste. You're just saying if your costs go up at your site, you come back to us and want to share those costs with us.
Correct. That is how that is written. And again, if the federal government or state mandates something, and we're a highly regulated, as you know, industry, right? They're at our site, pretty much all the time. Here up in Norwalk and where I'm at now in Rochester, New Hampshire, we have a larger landfill right behind me. So
we're relying on you to have determined what your costs to operate. And I guess I feel like we've been given a number, and that's what we're relying on in entering into this contract. And this language basically says if our costs to run our site go up, you're going to come back and share with us. And that doesn't give us a lot of certainty. But I think you're talking about something narrower than the way this is written, is what.
Well, again, with this, how this is written, again, it's a little bit redundant, but yet it covers. If someone does come to us, the state and says, it's not a public road.
Yeah,
so
I mean, if you wrote something like resulting from changes in federal, state, or local law or regulations that directly increase the cost to waste management of handling mid-coast solid waste, or, I mean, I'm just drafting on the fly here, but I think it does need to be more targeted. If you've got a new fee that you're being assessed because of our waste, that's sort of a pass-through fee you want to have the ability to do. But this is written much more generally and vaguely than that.
Well, again, I don't read it that way, but I guess I see your point. I read it again as if site, well, I got my cheaters right here.
I mean, and it goes.
And I apologize because I have not been involved in this contract at all. So I am just keying off of Allison's.
Yeah, I think, we're obviously delving into some specifics. I do read it as being the right, the 5 on 4C regarding the certain federal, state, and local regulation specifically to receipt, transportation, handling, disposal of acceptable waste, where I think 5, if anything, 5 overlaps with force majeure.
The last part of it is force majeure when it talks about acts of God.
But let's review their definition of force majeure here, which is really to include strikes, labor trouble, riots, changes in applicable laws, regulations, or interpretations thereof, imposition of laws or governmental orders, pandemics, fires. So to
And
say,
typically a force majeure is when it's not the fault of the contractor.
That's pretty classic force majeure.
Yeah.
a pandemic. So if
That's a force majeure.
if your costs go up because of the pandemic,
Hasn't yet, but I can't, we'll put it this way. If I could predict the future, no offense, folks, but I wouldn't be here tonight. I'd be at my retirement home somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
But
Yeah, I think that, well,
but I mean, I would expect that, don't you have insurance for certain things?
we do. But that's, again, that's, as Bob indicated, that's typical force majeure.
there's no insurance for force
All
majeure.
of our contracts.
There's no insurance for force majeure.
Yeah, and this force majeure is beyond its reasonable control.
Right.
Whether, it says whether beyond its reasonable control, whether or not foreseeable.
Right.
Correct.
Question for you, Pete.
Yes, sir.
With all the municipalities that you deal with, is everybody does everybody have the same contract?
There's
For the most
slight
part.
nuances, but yes, this, I don't want to call it boilerplate, but the
Right.
indemnification, force majeure,
Right.
insurance language, that's out of my control and out of the company control, because that's our insurance company dictates what we can write and what we can't and say in our insurance, but it is all the same, other than some terms and stuff like that.
And how many municipalities use this landfill?
Oh, God, I manage, I want to say 80 municipalities in
Okay,
Maine, roughly.
so at least 80 other attorneys have looked at this contract and said it was okay. I'm
I would
guessing.
assume because they all had the option, and I've
Right.
had some dialogue with Waterville and in
Right.
Winslow when we were negotiating their disposal agreement.
So I'm assuming this verbiage has been litigated to nauseam, so to speak, and no one's come up with anything better so far yet.
Nobody
Correct. Let's just say
objected.
I've never seen it changed.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good
So-
question.
That's the end of my questions.
Anybody else with questions on the contract?
Yeah, just quickly, has our attorney looked over this contract? And-
Yes.
Yes, I made this statement up front.
We're 81.
Okay, well then I'll back out because if our attorney has
He-
looked at this, then I
I made the
apologize.
statement. I made the statement right up front, folks. I said to Mike to confirm that both sides have looked at it and our attorney has reviewed it and he answered yes. So with that, board time decision.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Allison,
about
go
a
ahead.
different aspect of the contract. It was hard for me to see in the part about termination, just to understand if we were to try to terminate, or say we decided we wanted to start taking our waste somewhere else. I actually wasn't able to find in the contract any massive penalty for that. It said that, the non-defaulting party would have the right to basically terminate the agreement. But I couldn't find that anything else. That what would you have the right to do if we decided, I'm not suggesting this will happen, but it has happened in the past where towns have decided, we don't want to take our waste there, we're just going to start taking our somewhere else. What would happen? What would be the consequence for us?
Well, if I all of a sudden realized tonnage wasn't being received at Norwich Walk, I'd be on the phone with Mike. Mike, what's going on? Oh, the board decided to go with ABC incinerator. All right, well, we have a contract. Well, they decided to go somewhere else, and they're going to walk away from it. I think it would end up in court, and we again would be a legal document that we, if signed, what we would have. And again, I'm not an attorney. What I believe would happen is if it went to court, we would probably look for
Compensation.
yeah, for the tons that were said roughly what you generated over the last
Right.
year.
And I think this clause is probably, from the layman's perspective, mislabeled. It's not a termination clause. It's a default clause.
Well, it doesn't say that in the contract that you would have the right to do that. It says if this happens and we're not able to remedy the default, it says that the party in default, if the party in default fails to correct the default as provided above, the non-defaulting party without further notice shall have all the following rights and remedies, which may be exercised singly or in combination. And it says, 1, the right to declare that this agreement, together with all rights granted the party in default hereunder, are terminated effective upon such date as the non-defaulting party shall designate. So, and then it says, if the defaulting party is the contractor, Midco Solid Waste Corp. Shall have the right to license others to perform the services.
Correct. If that happened, Allison, we would, if the above actions happened and we were in fault, then the corporation could go somewhere else at no penalty
Yeah.
if we were in default.
Yeah, this is a fairly standard term, default language.
And I was getting at is if the town all of a sudden decided, you know what, we want to go back to Eco-Maine, for example,
Right,
and then there would be an issue.
right.
It doesn't say, it only says that if that happens, that you would have the right to terminate the contract. It doesn't say that you would have the right to seek 3 years worth of estimated, 2 years worth of estimated tip fees for, I'm not opposed to this. When I read this, I think, okay, no big deal. So it doesn't, I'm just curious what.
Well, on the first page of the agreement, second section under, what is it? Whereas the the MCSWC during the term of this agreement will provide to Waste Management Disposal Services of Maine, Inc., all residential, commercial, blah, 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 collectively known as acceptable waste generated within the MCSWC, which are collected through the transfer station.
And contracts don't typically include what all the damages could be.
Right.
Okay,
A lot of case law about what the damages that waste management could assert if we.
okay, thanks. That's helpful.
And I'm sorry, Allison, if I didn't
No,
answer.
that's okay. It's a good
No,
question.
it's kind of like a lawyer thing, whether the unsaid things are relevant or not. And so I appreciate it.
Any other creative, interesting comments, please? Brian?
This question is from Mike. Do you foresee it sometime or anytime in the next 3.5 years where any landfill material could go to the landfill? Is that a possibility? Or are we more than 3.5 years out currently?
Let me make sure I understand that. That landfill material go to the landfill.
Meaning what we're filling our landfill with.
Okay.
there any
Construction and
possible-
demolition debris. Yeah.
Right. Is there any way with it? Are we good for at least 3.5 years where we're at?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Back to board. Do I have a decision on this contract or motion?
I move to approve the Midcoast Solid Waste Disposal Contract between Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation and Waste Management Disposal Services of Maine, Inc. For 3 years, beginning July 1st, 2021, with an end date of June 30th, 2024.
Second.
Second from Denise. Discussion. Not hearing any roll call vote. Mr. Josh,
Yes.
Mr. Brian,
Yes.
Ms. Wendy, Ms. Denise.
Yes.
I saw Wendy say yes.
Yes.
I'm confirming her yes. Let's see, Allison,
Whew,
yes or no?
yes, 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 only because I don't want to make the rest of the board look like I was against you, but I want to vote no.
Vote
Because
your
I do not like that clause. That really,
Allison, vote your heart.
no.
Bob, yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Never be afraid of saying no.
I'm a yes too.
I'm sorry, Karen. You made the motion. I ignored you. Story of my life. You and Josh can thrash it out later. But thank you very much. Pete, thank you. We look
Thank you,
forward
Pete.
to 3 years starting on July 1st and we're seeing costs totally reduced every year. Thanks.
Oh, well.
Appreciate it, folks. Thanks again, and we look forward to working with you and partnering with you.
Right.
Thank
And
you.
Mike, I'll be in touch. Oh, and Mike, real quickly, while I have you on,
Yep.
when I set the account up internally, do I send invoices to the PO box? Or is there a different address?
Yes. Yep. PO Box 1016.
Okay, and whose attention? Yours, Mike?
Yes.
Gotcha. Perfect.
All right. With that, thanks, Pete.
Thank you,
very much.
folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night, Pete.
Good night.
With that, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
I second too.
Oh, all kinds of seconds there. Great gang. We're making one stride at a time. Not always easy. With that, roll call vote for Allison.
Yes.
You can say no.
I'm
Brian,
having fun. I enjoy.
I know you.
I'm a yes.
Denise,
No, I vote no.
Denise
Yes.
and Wendy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And Mr. Josh
Yes.
and Karen, I got to hit you again.
Yeah.
Bob also. Thanks, folks. No, it ain't easy, but one step at a time. Life is not ideal. Our next regular scheduled meeting, we'll back on schedule, will be February and date. I don't have that date in front of me, Beth. I don't know that you.
24th.
Sorry, say again.
February 24th is what I have.
Wednesday, February 24th, and we'll look forward to it, but I'm sure we'll be chatting in between. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.